The prison yard always became quieter when something important was about to happen. No alarms. No announcements. The inmates simply felt it. Conversations slowed. Card games stopped. Weights were left hanging in midair. Men who had spent years surviving behind concrete walls had developed an instinct for trouble. That afternoon, every one of those instincts pointed toward the yard entrance. Because standing beside the chain-link fence was the man everyone feared. His name was Marcus Reed. Most inmates simply called him Chief. Not because the guards gave him authority. Because prisoners did. He had spent nearly 15 years inside. Long enough to understand every unwritten rule. Long enough to know every guard's routine. Long enough to build a reputation that reached every corner of the prison. Chief rarely raised his voice. He never had to. When he wanted someone's attention, he simply waited. And today, he was waiting for one man. Mike Tyson. It had been 3 days since Mike arrived at the prison. Long enough for everyone to know his name. Long enough for rumors to spread through every cell block. Some inmates believed he could knock out anyone alive. Others thought prison would humble him within a week. A few hoped someone would challenge him. Because prison had very little entertainment. And nothing attracted attention faster than two powerful men sharing the same space. Especially when one of them had once been the most feared boxer on earth. Inside cell block D, Officer Patterson unlocked Mike's door. Yard time. Mike stood quietly. He folded the letter he had been reading from his mother and slipped it into his Bible. Carlos looked over from the top bunk. You here? Mike glanced up. Hear what? Carlos hesitated. They're saying Chief's been waiting outside since lunch. Mike calmly buttoned his prison shirt. For me. Carlos nodded. He's turned down 3 card games. Skipped basketball. Hasn't moved. Mike smiled faintly. Guess he's patient. Carlos didn't smile back. You don't understand. No, I think I do. Carlos climbed down from his bunk. Mike, I'm serious. Nobody keeps Chief waiting. Mike looked at him. And nobody owns the yard. Carlos sighed. You really don't know how this place works yet. Mike rested a hand on his shoulder. Maybe. Or maybe. Some things work the same everywhere. The heavy steel doors opened. Dozens of inmates stepped into the afternoon sunlight. Some headed for the basketball court. Others toward the pull-up bars. Small groups gathered around picnic tables. But today, nobody stayed focused on what they were doing. Their eyes kept drifting toward one corner of the yard, where Chief stood, arms folded, watching the entrance, waiting. Mike stepped outside. The warm air felt different after days inside concrete walls. He took a slow breath, looked around, then started walking, not toward Chief, toward the walking track, as though he hadn't noticed him at all. Several inmates exchanged confused looks. Did he not see him? Oh, he saw him. Then why is he walking away? Nobody knew, not even Chief. For the first time that afternoon, his expression changed. Only slightly. Confusion. Mike completed one full lap around the yard. Steady pace. Hands behind his back. Just walking. Like any other inmate enjoying 30 minutes outside. Chief finally pushed away from the fence. He began walking toward him. Slowly. Purposefully. The conversations around the yard disappeared. Weights stopped moving. Even the basketball game came to a halt. 20, maybe 30 men quietly gathered nearby. Not close enough to interfere. Just close enough not to miss anything. Chief stopped directly in Mike's path. You Mike Tyson? Mike nodded. Yeah. Chief studied him carefully. I've been waiting. Mike smiled politely. I figured. You know who I am? I've heard your name. And Mike shrugged. Nice to meet you. Several inmates looked at each other. That wasn't the answer anyone expected. Chief narrowed his eyes. You ain't nervous? Mike looked around the yard. I've been in places a lot louder than this. A few older inmates smiled. One whispered, This man's different. Chief folded his arms. You know why I wanted to meet you? Mike answered honestly. No. Chief looked around at the growing crowd. They're watching. Mike nodded. They are. They expect something. Mike looked at the men standing around them. then back at Chief. People usually do. Chief took one slow step closer. So, don't disappoint them. Silence. The challenge had finally been spoken. No shouting. No threats. Just 7 simple words. Every inmate leaned forward, waiting for Mike's answer. Mike looked at Chief for several seconds, then quietly smiled. I think they've already been disappointed enough in life. Chief blinked. The answer wasn't aggressive. It wasn't submissive either. It was something else. Unexpected. For the first time in years, someone had answered his challenge without accepting it. And somehow, that unsettled him more than a fight ever could. The yard remained completely silent. Neither man moved. Neither looked away. Because both understood. This wasn't about proving who was stronger. It was about discovering which one of them truly understood power. End of part 1. Neither man moved. The entire prison yard had become silent. Even the guards standing in the watchtowers noticed something was different. Officer Patterson glanced toward another correctional officer. Keep an eye on them. You think it'll happen? Patterson didn't answer. He simply kept watching. Chief studied Mike for several seconds. You know, most men try to prove themselves the first time they walk into this yard. Mike smiled. And does it ever help them? Chief laughed once. No. It usually gets them carried back inside. A few inmates chuckled. Mike nodded. Then I'd rather learn from their mistakes. Chief raised an eyebrow. You don't seem interested in making a name. Mike looked around the yard. I already had one. And look where it got me. Those words caught everyone off guard. No excuses. No self-pity. Just honesty. Chief respected honesty. Even when he didn't agree with it. He began walking slowly around Mike. Like a coach studying an opponent before a fight. You know what these men think? Mike shrugged. They think I'm here to test you. Mike nodded. Aren't you? Chief smiled. Maybe. He stopped directly in front of Mike again. But they're wrong. Mike waited. I'm really testing something else. And what's that? Chief folded his arms. Your ego. Several inmates exchanged confused looks. Mike didn't. He understood immediately. Chief pointed toward the weight bench. Yesterday, 3 guys challenged each other over that bench. They all ended up in segregation. Mike nodded. I heard. Last month, 2 inmates fought over a basketball. One lost his parole hearing because of it. Mike stayed quiet. Chief stepped closer. This place has a funny way of making people forget what's important. Mike looked directly at him. So why are you telling me this? Chief smiled. Because I'm trying to figure out if you're different. One of the younger inmates shouted from behind the crowd. Chief, just fight him already. Several others laughed. Another yelled, Come on, Tyson. Show us what you got. The noise spread through the yard. Some inmates wanted entertainment. Others simply wanted to witness history. Mike looked toward the crowd. Then back at Chief. They're bored. Chief nodded. They are. They think violence solves boredom. Mike replied quietly. Only for a few seconds. Chief looked at Mike carefully. You know, I've heard stories about you. Mike smiled. I've heard a few too. They say you used to scare people just by looking at them. Mike chuckled. I was younger. Chief asked. What changed? Mike looked toward the prison wall surrounding the yard. Life. Silence. Chief nodded slowly. Fair answer. Without warning, Chief reached down. He picked up Mike's baseball cap that had been resting on the nearby bench. He held it in his hand. The crowd leaned forward. Now they thought it was beginning. Chief looked at the cap. Then looked back at Mike. What if I don't give this back? Nobody breathed. Every eye remained fixed on Mike Tyson. He could grab it. He could argue. He could shove Chief. Instead, Mike smiled. It's just a cap. Chief narrowed his eyes. What if it's disrespect? Mike answered calmly. Only if I let it become disrespect. The yard fell silent again. One older inmate quietly whispered, Damn. Chief tossed the cap back. Mike caught it easily. No celebration. No dramatic reaction. He simply placed it back on his head. Chief laughed for the first time. A real laugh. You just ruined half the bets in this yard. Mike looked confused. Bets. Chief pointed toward a picnic table. Several inmates immediately looked away. They've been betting all morning on who throws the first punch. Mike smiled. Looks like they lost. Chief shook his head. No, they're about to. At that moment, a young inmate pushed through the crowd. He couldn't have been older than 21. His fists were clenched. He looked nervous, but determined. You ain't gonna fight him. Then I will. The yard instantly became tense again. Chief turned. What are you doing? The young inmate ignored him. He stared directly at Mike. My brother worshipped you. He spent every dollar he had watching your fights. Then you went to prison. You disappointed him. Mike looked at the young man quietly. I'm sorry he feels that way. The young inmate shouted. That's it. That's all you got. Mike nodded. It's the truth. The young man looked confused. He had expected excuses. Instead, he got accountability. For a moment, he didn't know what to do next. Chief stepped between them. That's enough. But I said enough. The young inmate lowered his head and walked away. Mike looked at Chief. You didn't have to do that. Chief smiled faintly. No, but I wanted to. Mike looked surprised. Chief continued. I've spent 15 years watching men fight over pride. I was curious whether one man could remind them there's another way. Mike looked around the yard. Think it's working? Chief glanced at the silent crowd. They're listening. For the first time, not because they expected violence, but because they were hearing something they rarely heard inside prison walls. Hope. End of part 2. The yard remained silent. No shouting. No cheering. Just dozens of inmates watching two men who had every reason to fight, and neither seemed interested. Chief looked around the yard, then back at Mike. You know why I really asked you to come out here? Mike smiled. I don't think you wanted to fight. Chief nodded. I didn't. I wanted to know if the stories were true. What stories? That the old Mike Tyson would have hit first. Mike looked toward the fence surrounding the yard. Maybe he would have. Chief crossed his arms. So what happened to him? Mike took a slow breath. He got tired. Chief frowned. Tired of fighting? Mike nodded. Tired of proving something to people who never cared. Silence. Those words landed differently inside a prison. Because almost every man standing there had spent years trying to prove something. Chief slowly sat down on one of the benches. The crowd looked confused. Mike remained standing. Chief pointed beside him. Sit. Mike did. No hesitation. No fear. Just two men talking. The crowd had expected fists. Instead, they got a conversation. Chief broke the silence. You know why everybody listens to me? Mike looked at him. They're afraid. Chief nodded. Exactly. He looked around the yard. And every night. I wonder how many of them actually respect me. Mike didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, Fear's rented. Chief looked confused. Mike continued. Respect is earned. Fear disappears the moment people think you're weak. But respect stays long after you're gone. Chief slowly smiled. I've never heard it explained like that. Just then, the loudspeaker echoed across the yard. 5 minutes remaining. Nobody moved. Normally inmates rushed to finish basketball games. Weightlifting stopped. Walking groups headed toward the doors. Today, everyone stayed where they were, waiting. Even the guards seemed curious. Officer Patterson leaned against the fence. Another officer asked, You think they're done? Patterson smiled. I think they finished 10 minutes ago. Chief reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded photograph. Old. Edges worn. He handed it to Mike. It showed a little girl, about 8 years old, standing beside a birthday cake. My daughter. Mike looked at the picture. Beautiful. Chief nodded. I haven't seen her in 11 years. Mike carefully handed it back. You write to her? Every month. Does she write back? Chief looked down. Sometimes. Mike stayed quiet. Chief sighed. I spent years building a reputation in here. And lost the only reputation that mattered. Those words hit harder than anything said all afternoon. Mike looked toward the prison walls. You know, 'cause D'Amato used to tell me something. Chief waited. Every choice you make today is introducing you to your future. Mike smiled faintly. I didn't understand it when I was 20. I understand it now. Chief looked at the photograph again. So what do I do? Mike answered honestly. You can't change yesterday, but you can stop letting yesterday decide tomorrow. The yard buzzer sounded. Yard time over. One by one, the inmates started walking toward the doors. But something unusual happened. As they passed Chief, they nodded. Not because they were afraid, because they had just watched something different. One older inmate quietly said, "Good talk, Chief." Another smiled at Mike. "Champ." A third simply said, "See you tomorrow." No tension, no whispers, no bets, just quiet respect. As the line moved back toward the cell blocks, Chief stopped beside Mike. "I owe you an apology." Mike looked surprised. "For what?" "I wanted to make an example out of you." Mike smiled. "You did." Chief frowned. "What do you mean?" Mike looked around the yard one last time. They expected two men to fight. Instead, they watched two men think. Chief laughed. A genuine laugh. "You know, I think that's a better story." Mike nodded. "I do too." Later that evening, Carlos looked up from his bunk. "So, what happened?" Mike sat down. "We talked." Carlos stared at him. "For almost an hour?" Mike smiled. "Sometimes talking takes longer than fighting." Carlos laughed. "I've lived here 6 years. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that." Mike leaned back against the wall. "Maybe that's why more people fight." Months later, Chief's influence inside the prison began to change. He stopped settling every disagreement with intimidation. Instead, he listened first. The younger inmates noticed. The guards noticed. Even Officer Patterson admitted, "I've never seen this yard this quiet." No one ever gave Mike Tyson credit, and he never asked for it, because the greatest victories are often the ones nobody applauds. Years later, former inmates still talked about that afternoon. Some claimed Mike Tyson stared Chief down. Others swore they almost fought. But the men who were actually there remembered something much simpler. The most feared boxer in the world walked into a prison yard where everyone expected violence. Instead, he walked away with something far more difficult to earn: respect. Because real strength isn't measured by how many fights you win. It's measured by how many you never have to fight. The end.